Welcome back to another episode of the Built to Finish podcast. Today's episode is going to be unique in that I'm using it to announce a really special event that I'm planning, and it's also going to be used as an FAQ to answer many questions that folks will probably have. And the questions will be answered by two special guests that I'm going to have on this episode. So now that I have you at the edge of your seats, the event is an Ecuador climbing school for anybody interested in learning mountaineering skills. It's going to be held on one of Ecuador's volcanoes. And the climbing school in Ecuador is going to be bookended by personal one-on-one advisory services specifically pertaining to a possible exit for founders. And these advisory services will be delivered prior, during, and after the expedition on a one-on-one basis. And we will have group mastermind type events happening during the trip itself. So without any further ado, let me introduce the first guest. Welcome to Built to Finish. I'm your host, Stephen Pivnik. Join me each week as we explore the journeys of audacious goal setters. This includes experienced founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs sharing pivotal moments that propel their success. We'll also be talking with endurance athletes who push the limits of physical and mental ability. This show is brought to you by Acresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services to help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Let's get started. So today's guest is a repeat guest on the podcast. He has several exits under his belt personally, and he has advised on over 30 other exits, generating over $1 billion in founder wealth. He's also a fellow extreme skier who I have the pleasure of helicopter skiing with once a year in British Columbia. Mark Hodges, welcome back to the show.
Stephen, thank you very much. It's great to see you again. All of those exits are founders and founder owned. So we have that kind of experience. And you and I started your journey, not personally knowing you, but professionally, I think about 10 years ago.
You're right. It has been that long.
I don't put that anniversary in my calendar because it frightens me, but but it is in there. And this whole expedition in Ecuador and marrying that with advisor, that's an awesome idea. How did you come up with that?
Interesting question. Well, when I started pursuing endurance sports on my own, and I consider this my midlife crisis, I started doing endurance sports when I turned 40. I really found that there's a ton of similarities between endurance sports, specifically mountaineering, and entrepreneurship. Both require a lot of planning, preparation, execution, pivots, setbacks, decisions, camaraderie, leadership.
Yeah.
There's just so many similarities. And when I personally started participating in endurance sports, I became a better leader and a better owner of a company and vice versa. So I had this thought of introducing entrepreneurs and founders to mountaineering in the hopes that they will have a similar experience.
Yeah. Well, that makes it a lot more clear. I find founders are always so busy, they have trouble spending a day on something. So I would imagine the ones that do this are very motivated, but what a great mix.
Yeah, I agree. So let me ask you, you've worked with many founders over the years. What would you say the ones that go through your methodology or our methodology successfully have in common? The ones that succeed.
The ones that succeed, yes, they trust that a third party is going to get them to the finish line, however they define that. That's one attribute that they have in common. The second is they're much more confident about the business, about the market. Third, they become more sophisticated about money because they will have, if they listen to our advice, worked with a wealth manager along the way. And the fourth thing is they actually have to think about, what do I want to do next, if anything? Because they've rung the bell, a major life goal, generational wealth in many cases, and that's an exciting point in time.
Yeah, I'm speaking about wealth creation. I know that one of the tenets of the methodology that you and I both utilize is this proceeds waterfall model. Can you just talk about that a little bit? Because that's something I plan on going deep with everybody individually.
Sure. It's interesting because for founder clients, the founder is more of an engineering, accounting type. They go through about 27 versions of this waterfall spreadsheet by the time the money's in the bank. And if they're more of the salesy type, maybe they do 3 versions of it. But at the top is a purchase price, and then there's a plus or minus in the spreadsheet of working capital. If you have excess working capital, you get to keep that excess. If you have less, it reduces your purchase price. And then there's like 16 deductions from that purchase price. So they're all unfavorable to the founder. And so this waterfall is not vertical parallel lines. It's more like a funnel. It gets smaller and smaller as you get to it. And you've seen that, and just a few examples you can add to it of deductions, how much you give your employees in stock or cash bonuses, CPA tax advice, legal help, etc.
Yeah, it's a really powerful tool, and it really when I went through this exercise, it opened up my eyes as far as sometimes big, in my case, it was a big difference between the top line number and what you're actually going to go home with. So it's a very
Yeah.
eye-opening exercise that founders need to go through early on in the process.
Yeah, it's not just a pre-tax versus after-tax. There is a substantial cost to achieve to the founder of the exit. Could be severance costs, all the costs we mentioned, and that can run, ignoring employee equity plans and things like that. That could be 5% to 10% of the actual purchase price, the cost to achieve.
Right. No, that's definitely good for folks to keep in mind. So the proceeds waterfall is one of many items that I'm going to be discussing with founders before we head out to Ecuador and to the mountain. And then I'm planning on having like a mastermind type session or multiple sessions because we're going to have 9 evenings together when we're out there in mostly civilized environments. So this isn't camping 9 days in a row out at high altitude. So except for one night, most evenings will be in a hotel restaurant, which is going to make it very comfortable. And I plan on having a lot of mastermind sessions with the entire group, and then followed with additional recommendations one-on-one after we're done.
I really like that. No, we just had sessions like that last week in Park City at lower altitude without climbing equipment. But those are mastermind sessions, And so if I recall correctly, you also run a CEO peer group, at least one that you and I have talked about. Are there similarities between this expedition and the CEO peer group you lead?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm not going to completely replicate the methodology we use at the CEO peer group that I run, but the actual founder of the CEO project, which is the CEO peer group that you're mentioning, is going to be my partner in crime on this trip. So all of the members will have the benefit of my personal exit experience, my advisory exit experience, as well as Jim's exit experience, which he has plenty of. So there's just an added bonus to the group to have him at all of our mastermind group evenings.
Awesome. Love it.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, let me brainstorm something with you. There's a myriad of topics and issues and challenges to discuss, and we're definitely not going to have time to talk about everything during these masterminds, because obviously we're going to spend some time talking about mountaineering as well, and the guides are going to be teaching us everything that we need to know to be safe and successful on the mountain.
Right. So we need to pay attention to that.
Exactly. If you had to pick, like, let's say 3 topics I make sure I cover as I'm still in the process of planning the agenda for the entire trip, what would you say these mastermind topics should be?
So they're going to be a subset of the topics probably that you and I cover at our founder roundtable dinners we have in New York and London and Philadelphia. But I'm going to pick ones that are probably less self-evident to a listener. So one is recruiting senior talent. How do you do that? How do you find it? How do you afford it? How do you build the bench? How do you introduce a professional expert to your loyal amateurs on your management team? So I think that whole senior talent would be great engagement. I think another one would be exiting a non-performing executive or business partner, co-founder, because that's very hard. You've had experience with that. You and I have dealt with many clients with that, and that's just a really tough one. And then at a high level, scaling a business successfully. There's so many levers you can use to do that, including going on expeditions with like-minded individuals, peer groups, mastermind sessions. But there's so many that I think that'd be really really ripe.
No, I think that's great. Thank you. I'm glad I brainstormed this with you because my list is very, very long and I definitely need to pare it down because again, there's only, so many hours that we're going to be able to do this. And I think those are three great topics.
Yeah. I have one other idea for you. Maybe it's a reminder, but many months ago, in terms of the book you're writing, I put together a table of contents, like 3-page, and that is just chock full of all the topics that you and I have run across. So you might use that as a pick list.
No, that's a great idea. Another spoiler alert. There is a book coming out in the future about the methodology that we utilize to help founders exit. So I'm speaking about topics. Another big one are valuation killers. And that's something that's going to be discussed either, one-on-one with individuals or as a group. In your experience, what have been some of the valuation killers that have really reduced the amount of money that a company can be sold for?
Yeah. So when you and I work together with a client, within the first 90 days or first 6 months, both parties know whether we can work together. So we don't work with flounderers. We work with founders. Flounders, we released a white paper recently that I know you've read that had 16 behaviors of flounders, and they're just never going to get an exit that's anywhere close to what they think. Once we get through that 3 to 6 month evaluation period, what depletes value is when they don't invest enough in the sales team or organization and their growth rate starts falling off. They lose one or two key customers, key meaning the biggest accounts, because they didn't have a red, yellow light account, red light account management process, and they took their eye off the ball. And the third one would be chasing a bright, shiny ball they shouldn't be chasing. So if they're a services company, we're building this tool and it's going to be a great SaaS company, or we're going to open an office in the UK, and they just take their eye off core operating the company. So those would be examples.
No, that's definitely near the top of the list, and there's many others that we're going to be discussing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So my plan for anybody that's looking for additional information on the details of this trip is to meet with founders and some of their executive management team one-on-one prior to departure. This process will take anywhere from a week to 2, depending on how many executive team members they would like me to meet with. I'm gonna learn a lot about the founders' dreams and hopes and requirements, as well as the status of the company from him or herself, as well as their leadership team. My personal learning is going to continue via these mastermind sessions over all of these evenings on the mountain. And then I believe I'm going to have enough information at that point to present at least a high level outline of what the next 12 to 36 months is going to need to look like in order for them to march towards an exit. How do you feel about that approach and that delineation of time?
Yeah. I think it's brilliant in a number of respects. One is the founders, as you know, usually don't really know what their objectives are money-wise, time horizon. Do they want to go with the deal, not with the deal? So getting that out early. Second, testing them if they're willing to let you talk to their direct reports unfettered is a good measure of a founder. Flounders don't let that happen because they're afraid of what they're going to say. So I think that'll just be very insightful. It's like a 360-degree performance review in a way. And then if you can record somehow, document all of the learnings you have on the trip, that's going to be gold dust for these fellow climbers and expedition folks. And if you can package that all up in some kind of an assessment or readout to them about here's what I think I'm seeing and what you need to do in the next 4 to 12 quarters, there's a lot of value in that. They definitely will not have heard that before.
Awesome. I appreciate the feedback and thank you for validating the approach that I'm considering. I'm super excited about this trip and I can't wait to share more details as we announce this online and via all of our social media channels.
Is there a particular time of year you need to go because of weather or things
Yeah,
like that?
that's a great question. I was actually going to cover that on the next segment, but we'll cover it right now. Fortunately, Ecuador is a fantastic climbing destination, and the weather on the mountains is reasonable most 10 months out of the year. But specifically, we're going to be going at the beginning of August.
Okay, cool. Well, I know you'll keep me posted. I'll keep my eyes out Thanks for having me on, as always.
No, I definitely appreciate all the feedback that you've offered, your wealth of knowledge on everything exit related. If you don't mind, just share your contact information again in case anybody wants to get a hold of you directly.
Sure. The easiest way is to email me at mark.hodges@acresis.com, and Acresis is spelled ACRESIS.
Awesome. Thanks again, Mark. And we will talk with you soon.
You bet. Take care, Stephen.
Hey, everyone. Just a quick reminder that the Built to Finish podcast is brought to you by Acresis. Acresis have helped over 30 founders generate over $1 billion in wealth via strategic acquisitions or investor recapitalizations. If you're the owner of a middle market company and want to explore what a potential exit will look like for you so that you can finally realize the value of what you've been working so hard on, please do contact Acresis via the website acresis.com or hit me up on LinkedIn for more information at Stephen Pivnik. Now, back to the show. My second guest has actually stood on the top of the world, and I was with him on a Mount Everest expedition, and he made it to the very top, which was incredibly impressive. Griffin Mims, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks, Stephen. So great to be here.
No, great to have you here. Griffin is the international client manager at Alpenglow Expeditions, which is the guiding company that I use to go to Mount Everest. I had a phenomenal experience, and like I said, Griffin got to stand at the top of the world. So before we get into the details of this Ecuador trip that I'm planning, I mean, everybody loves to hear about Everest, so let's just spend a couple of minutes on Everest.
Yeah,
How long was
course.
the journey? How long was it to the top of Everest?
Yeah. So it's about a month-long expedition, and the weather window that we were aiming for was at the very tail end of the expedition. And so we actually summited on 32 or 31 of a 35-day expedition. Right at the tail end, we've summited Everest as quickly as 14 days round trip door to door from San Francisco. But this season, the weather window was a little bit later, so we spent a little bit of a longer time on the mountain.
Very cool. I remember your videos like they were yesterday. You're like, holy days.
Oh,
I'm at
my
the top of the world.
days. Massive. Yeah. I mean, it's such an incredible experience. I spent the last 6 years of my life helping other people get to climb Mount Everest and didn't realize that I was doing a bad job of selling the experience with Alpenglow until having been there and experienced it. So it truly is. It's a once in a lifetime experience and such a rewarding and fantastic climb.
Yeah, totally agree. So before we get into Ecuador specifically, can you share a little bit more information about Alpenglow? And before you do that, I just want to say that Everest was on my bucket list for the longest time because I've done several other mountains and I always wanted to go to Everest. And it wasn't until I discovered Alpenglow and their reputation, their skills, their safety measures, the quality of their guides that I finally said, you know what, this is the year that I'm going to go. So huge buildup too. Please explain who Alpenglow is.
Yeah, so Alpenglow Expeditions was founded by a mountaineer named Adrian Ballinger in 2004. Adrian is a fully certified IFMGA mountain guide. He's made 20 expeditions in the 20 summits of 8,000 meter peaks. He's summited Everest 10 times. He's done 14 seasons on the mountain. He summited Everest without oxygen, K2 without oxygen. Truly one of the best high-altitude mountaineers and mountain guides that we've seen in the last 3 decades. And Adrian built Alpenglow with a want to provide a really unique and high-touch experience climbing in the mountains. The mountains have this amazing way of giving you life. It's a life-changing experience going into these mountains, and Adrian wanted to do that at the highest degree possible. And so he designed all of our programming to be really high-touch, high-end, high-quality logistics, all kind of focused around the idea of maximizing the experience and then minimizing the hazard that we're taking in the mountains. And one of the big things that Adrian has developed over the last decade is it's an approach called the rapid ascent approach, where we use hypoxic tents to pre-acclimatize and save time on the mountains that we climb if you have that altitude experience. So like for us on Everest, we slept in these tents for 2 months leading into the start of the trip, and it allowed us to save.
Don't remind me.
Exactly. It's not the most fun, and usually your partner is not that excited about it, but it saves us almost a month of time on the expedition. So Adrian was really the first to pioneer this style of mountain climbing and mountain guiding in the Himalaya. So now we run 65 expeditions a year with over 350 clients climbing on all 7 continents, and really pride ourselves in running high quality, amazing expeditions with a very high chance of success.
I couldn't agree more. In training for Everest, I did the Ecuador expedition with you, not the one that we're going to be talking about today. But to your point, it was incredibly high touch, incredible attention to detail, huge attention to safety. And I walked away a super, super satisfied customer. And it really gave me a glimpse of what to expect when we were going to get to Everest. And that incredible, customer experience continued once we got to Everest. And it was just awesome. So I can't recommend Alpenglow highly enough, which is why I chose to partner with you guys for this wonderful executive retreat that I'm planning. So let's just dive right into the climbing school
let's
on
do it.
Ecuador. So why have you chosen Ecuador as one of your many destinations?
So for us, Ecuador is the best country on the planet to learn how to high altitude mountaineer. We have incredible access to 6,000 meter peaks where you're driving to the trailhead, which means that you're saving time in just travel logistics in general. Oftentimes these mountain ranges have a few days of travel to get to, and these mountains are just a few hours outside of Quito. It's also an amazing learning ground in the way that the mountains it's very easy for us to mitigate the hazard of these mountains, but you're still getting a massive mountain experience. And so we actually end up running 15 to 20 expeditions to Ecuador a year because these mountains give us a really good learning ground to help first-time climbers go and have a really good size bite out of the apple.
Okay, great. So speaking about first-time climbers, what exactly is the skill level required for this climbing school that we're going to be executing?
Yeah, so the skill experience that you need for this expedition is really kind of at ground level. You have no prerequisite requirements needed for this trip. I like to say that the more that you train, the more fun that you'll have. We could probably go down to Ecuador next month and be successful, but if you spent the few months, let's say 3 months prior to the start of the trip, really dedicated to your training, then you'd be doing all that you can to set yourself up for success. So no prerequisites required. And this program is designed to give you all of the foundations that you would need to be able to go climb bigger, taller mountains around the world, while also giving you a world-class experience. So if this is the highest mountain you ever climb and you say, Steven, I'm done with this, then you leave the trip having had a really incredible experience and with a really cool story to tell your family and friends.
Awesome. So from a physical perspective, I totally agree. A couple of months worth of mainly, cardiovascular, type training and maybe some lower body strength training would be beneficial. Do you provide a sample training plan for anybody that's going to be going?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of our team members get a free 30-minute consultation with our in-house personal trainer. Her name is Lynette, and she's amazing and has a varying degree of support that she offers. And then we also have a generalized 12-week training program that team members can follow that would do a good job of setting them up for success.
Okay, great. So we're going into a strange country, or strange for most who have never been there. And from my personal experience, and then you can elaborate on how this works, it's literally door-to-door service. You're picked up by a guide from the airport and you're dropped off by a guide at the airport, and you're never without a guide for the entire experience. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So our Alpenglow programming picks up from the moment that you arrive and ends the moment that you leave. So we'll be there to pick you up at the airport. We have all of the logistics and really your time spent in country kind of sorted out. There's plenty of downtime as well, but we'll make sure that we're filling your time well. And we'll really be spending most of our time in the mountains, but we'll spend 2 days in Quito acclimatizing. Quito is a beautiful city. It's a World Heritage City. It's an amazing place to explore. Our guides live in Quito, so we'll take you to really amazing restaurants. We'll do some kind of tourist things. And that day is designed to help you start acclimatizing, but also to help for any extra bags that are delayed or people if they're delayed. Quito's at 9,000 feet, so we'll spend that day acclimatizing. And then we'll start with our acclimatization treks the following day by doing a trek right in the middle of downtown Quito called Ruca Pichincha. And that's kind of the beginning of the more mountain-centric programming. But Quito is a beautiful place to travel. We run, like I mentioned, 15 to 20 expeditions there a year, and have been doing that for the last 2 decades. So it's a country that we know really well and that we love to travel to.
I had an incredible experience in Quito, and it was safe, beautiful. I learned a ton about its history. I played total tourist, and got to actually go to the equator line,
Huh.
which was an interesting experience. So yes, yes to all of the above, phenomenal location. So once we get to the mountain, where will we sleep on a nightly
Yeah, good
basis?
question. So the great thing about climbing in Ecuador is there are beautiful haciendas that are at the base of each of the volcanoes. And so we'll be staying in these haciendas throughout our time. We'll end up spending the night before our summit bid in a hut that's right at the base of the mountain there. But then we'll be able to go from the hut under our summit bid. So the rest of the experience, you're having a beautiful hacienda with fresh food, warm bed, hot shower. It's kind of the perfect middle ground of big mountain experience and vacation, in the way that you'll still have a lot of really incredible, high quality accommodations, but then you'll go out and have a massive day in the mountains and be able to go try hard and push yourself.
Okay, so I just want to repeat that because this isn't glamping. This is actually staying in like you said, real bed, get a hot shower. There's electricity, there's Wi-Fi in most of these places, so people can reconnect with their loved ones and with work because that's going to inevitably come
Yeah,
up. And there's only going to be one night, which I would equate it to glamping because it's not exactly sleeping in a mountain
right.
tent. You're sleeping in
Yeah,
a
you're still
hut.
in a hut. The hut's actually quite nice, but it's not necessarily a hotel or a hacienda, but it's still an amazing experience. The rest of the trip, you're staying in these absurdly cool haciendas in Ecuador. They do a really good job.
If for anybody interested, I have plenty of pictures and I will happily share them. So, how cold will it get on
Yeah,
the
it's
mountain?
a good question. So it kind of depends a lot on the wind, but the great thing about climbing in Ecuador is it's equatorial. And so the weather is a little bit warmer in terms of the mountain experiences that we can get, but warmer would be, you could expect temperatures between 10 degrees and freezing on the summit bid as you're kind of making your way through the night. The summit day will wake up at
10, 10 degrees
10
Celsius
degrees
and
Celsius.
freezing. Okay, just want to make sure.
And so we'll be climbing through the night in some colder weather, but then as the sun comes up, it'll start to heat up and we'll have like some pretty comfortable climbing conditions, but it can get really cold, definitely freezing and below freezing, just kind of depending on the day. But typically it's not as bad as what you might experience on a cold winter day in New York City.
Okay, and definitely nowhere near as cold as Everest.
Definitely
So
nowhere
we're
near
not
as
going to
cold.
get 40 mile an hour winds with minus 30 temperatures.
Exactly.
So another question I always get is, what do you eat? So is it fair to assume that because we're staying in civilized areas and locations most nights, that it's basically restaurant type
Yeah,
food?
exactly. Yeah, the food in Quito is quite good. I like to kind of equate it to like Midwestern food. There's a lot of like strong meats and starches, but it's very good. And so we'll have the ability to eat at really high quality restaurants while we're in Quito, and then while we're in the huts, it'll be fresh, clean food similar to ordering at a restaurant at the haciendas, so that you can have really good, high nutrition food that you can then use as fuel on the summit bit.
Okay, great. And I know that, me personally, whenever I had to go to any mountain, I had a lot of selling to do to my spouse to ensure that I'm qualified, I'm in good enough shape, it's going to be safe, I'm not going to die. What are some of the main questions you get? Because when I was speaking with Adrian, he said that he's had a lot of phone calls with spouses,
Yes.
specifically for Everest trips, convincing them that their spouse is going to be okay on this
Yeah.
trip. What are some of the main concerns that you guys get, from spouses that you have to
Yeah.
address?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the concern revolves around like who the guides are, how much experience they have. And one of the pillars that we hold really true in Alpenglow and near to our heart is working with fully certified IFMJ mountain guides or aspirant mountain guides. The IFMJ is the international governing body of mountain guides. And so a fully certified IFMJ mountain guide is the highest level of trained mountain guides. It'd be the surgeons of the medical world. And we work exclusively with guides who are following the IFMGA track so that we can help control the quality that our team members are getting, but also so that we can mitigate the hazards that we experience on the mountain. So that's one way that we control the hazard there. The other is by having a lot of infrastructure in Ecuador. When you're climbing with Alpenglow, you're climbing with guides that climb these mountains 50 times a year and have other friends and resources on the mountain as well. So if there was an incident, we'd be able to respond to it really quickly and have a lot of infrastructure there. You're not going into the middle of Pakistan where there's no helicopters or people that can reach you for 10 days. It's very accessible, and it feels like you're far out there because you're on a massive mountain, but we have a lot of infrastructure that helps us kind of make that distance manageable in terms of a crisis response. So, we love running expeditions in Ecuador to these mountains because they're easy to mitigate the hazard that exists, and it's the best place on the planet for a partner to go and have a big mountain experience without needing to take on a ton of risk.
I couldn't agree more, which is why I chose to partner with you guys on this specific trip, because I was there and I lived everything that you just described. And I can't speak highly enough about the location, the destination, the volcanoes, their beauty, their grandeur, and the proximity to safety. It's so, so true and so valuable.
Yeah, it's a special place.
It really is. In your experience with Alpenglow, what percentage of folks that do the climbing school end up continuing onto higher peaks?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Probably 85 to 90% of the people that will join us on a climbing school go on to climb another mountain, whether that's in Bolivia or on Denali or on the full road to Everest. It just kind of depends. For the others, they have an amazing experience in Ecuador, and they might just realize that the altitude game isn't one that they want to play. But this expedition is designed to be that stepping stone for people. And so it's really nice to be able to give yourself the opportunity to open those doors and walk through them. Mountaineering is very much a game of stepping stones. And so it takes time to get the experience, and this is the best place to start. I've had team members who have started from ground zero in Ecuador and a year later stood on the summit of Everest. So it just kind of depends on how committed you are and how much time you have. But oftentimes I found that founders who have been able to exit have more time on their hands, and so this would be a good group of people to be able to get into the mountains.
So that's good. That's going to be a wonderful carrot to wave, saying that if you gain these skills and you exit successfully with my assistance, you may end up on a path to Everest.
Yeah, totally, 100%.
So warning, mountaineering is highly addictive. I know that I got hooked after my small climb, and I continued and made it all the way to Everest. So it's a ton of fun, and it's an incredibly rewarding experience. So Griffin, I'm going to try to set up several calls with folks that are interested so that we can have some group discussions with other FAQs. But if anybody wants to reach out to you directly, what is the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, definitely. So my email is griffin@alpenglowexpeditions.com. And then my phone number is 308-293-6629. Please feel free to reach directly out to me. Or if you're on the Alpenglow website, you can just click the inquire button, and that would be a great way to get a hold of me as well.
Thank you so much for joining me here today and providing all of this really great information.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen.
And thank you, everybody, for listening to another unique episode of the Built to Finish podcast. If you want more information about this great expedition that I'm planning, please go to my website, stephenpivnik.com/executive retreat. Everything Griffin mentioned, as well as a lot of the business content that Mark Hodges mentioned previously, is going to be located there. And there's a contact form where you can reach me to find more information, or you can always find me on LinkedIn. And my handle there is Stephen Pivnik. Again, thank you so much for tuning in today, and we'll talk to you next time. That's a wrap for this episode of Built to Finish. Thank you for tuning in. For show notes and more details, head over to podcast.stephenpivnik.com. Special thank you to our sponsor, Acresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services that help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Catch you next week.